This park actually belongs to the people of Torry. It doesn't belong to Aberdeen City Council. So we're really upset that big business is coming in, persuading the council to use our land.
So what they want to do is take the East Tullis burn and move it. So they're going to destroy what's there. And they call this enhancement. We're going to realign the burn and enhance it.
You don't need to build a factory to improve an ecosystem. All you do is you find the resources and you do it.
Planting a few saplings to replace all the trees and the wildlife here, it just doesn't make sense.
St.Fitticks was an Irish saint. He was in the bay and storm at sea. The sailors blamed St.Fitticks. They threw him off the boat and he walked up through Bay of Nig, and where he put his feet, on what's now the park, a holy spring came up and had healing properties, and that was used until the beginning of the 20th century. During the Reformation, the city of Aberdeen would fine people for going to Torry to have their children cured by St.Fitticks healing well. So that's where that old church that sits on the park comes from. When the oil industry came to Aberdeen, Torry was a fishing community. The powers that be said that they would flatten the beautiful old village of Old Torry for the Shell Marine Base. So that was the start of the problem, because the folk in Torry were fishermen, boat repairers, fish processors. There was you can see there's a theme going on there. They were very heavily dependent on the sea, and they'd just lost their fishing village to the oil industry. The whole of Torry started to become degraded, really. They built East Tullis industrial estates and Altons on the edge of the community. They had two huge landfill sites with a little gap in the middle, because Torry is a very ancient place and there were prehistoric ruins there. When they built the industrial estates, they culverted the East Tullis burn underneath the industrial estates. And then there were all these misconnections, so that all the filth from the industrial estates was going into this burn underground. It was emerging from a culvert underneath the railway line into the park, and it'd been cut into a long straight channel, and it was filthy and it stank and it flooded every year, spewing red stinking stuff over that edge of the park. About 2000, the city council gave permission for this huge sewage treatment work to be built in the corner there, which gave rise to what they call the Torry stink. It was a private finance initiative, and it didn't function very well. It smelled awful. One of the local women at that point went, this is where our children play. She set the very ambitious target of raising £250,000 to improve the park, to put in playground for the children, a few trees, to mask the sewage treatment works. The Torry community, which is not a wealthy community by any means, managed to raise £178,000. The Aberdeen City Council made it up to £250,000. And in 2004, the good people of Torry went out and planted, I can't remember, I think it was 10,000 trees in 5 hours. Complete community enterprise. So the council had by that time got very involved and rather concerned, because Torry was suffering. And there was this plan in 2012 for a complete regeneration of Torry. They were going to have this wonderful coastal area, coastal park, and they were going to have an aquarium, and everyone was really excited. And the park was going to be the centre of this. They spent £380,000 putting in a wetland system, a constructed wetland to clean the water. So the filth that was coming from East Tullis and Alton's industrial estate into the park was mitigated. They planted 150,000 separate wildflower plants to make it look attractive. People Seebeck, who were in charge of the project, got a company, Salix, which is a big nursery down in Norfolk, to send up loads and loads of plants. Once they'd improved the water quality and put in lots of attractive flowers, animals, birds started to come in, insects. Nature, given a helping hand, started to work on her own to improve the situation. It looked absolutely great, such a change. And as I say, won multiple awards. And then Port of Aberdeen had decided that they needed Bay of Nigg, which is a beautiful, pristine bay right next to the St.Fitticks Park. And they wanted it for a harbour, so that they wouldn't lose oil and gas jobs to Norway. That's what they said. And they employed a company called Bigger Economics, who said that this would produce thousands and thousands of jobs and create billions of pounds worth of money for the economy if only they sacrificed the bay. There were lots of protections written into that for the folk in Torry. Enhancements to St. Fitticks Park, interpretation centres, you name it, Torry was going to get it. So that was 2014. They got permission to build the harbour and they started plotting. Barton Wilmore prepared this document, the feasibility study for creating an energy transition zone round about the new harbour. The planning department at Aberdeen City Council started changing long-established planning legislation that was there to protect Greenbelt to allow this to go on. The SNP were told on the 27th of February of 2020. Alec Nicholl was at that point the leader of the SNP group in the council. He wanted St. Fitticks Park removed from the local development plan. St. Fitticks Park and Dooney's Farm had to be removed. At that point, the council were 23 Labour Conservative Independent administration and the opposition, which was the SNP, 22, one vote of difference. That one vote was held by a bloke called Alan Donnelly. Alan Donnelly had been charged and found guilty of sexual offences. His voting rights were removed 2 days after this vote. That was in the March. And in the June, this wonderful woman, Renee Slater, who was very, very ill, absolute gem of a person, had been poking us all and saying, what are we going to do about the park? Sick as she was, she said, well, if nobody else is going to fight it, I will. We were all so embarrassed that we formed a group to fight it. She put a mannequin as a candidate for Aberdeen City Council. She got arrested, of course, for offences against the Representation of the People Act. Very typical Tory action. You know, she said that a mannequin would stand up better for the rights of people in Tory than the elected council would. So the feasibility study came up, it got rezoned, we formed Friends of St. Fitticks Park, we've been fighting it ever since. ETZ Limited is not a private development company. ETZ Limited was formed because of a business plan that was drawn up. It says that it's from Ian Wood's Opportunity Northeast, Aberdeen Harbour Board, Scottish Enterprise, which is the Scottish Government's funding organisation and Aberdeen City Council. The business plan basically said, give us £53 million of public money for an energy transition zone. So this was on Greenbelt. This was still protected Greenbelt at this point. And the Scottish government said, OK, we'll give you 26 million. And the UK government said, we'll give you 27 million. So this is publicly funded. So you have a situation where our local authority is the planning authority, claims to be the landowner, and all these officers working on delegated authority behind closed doors. The state of play is that we're now arguing about the phasing plan and trying to stop them bringing in the bulldozers to move the park. They want to leave Torry as a small residential area surrounded by polluting industries. The fact that they're demolishing the RAAC houses means that they've got rid of 10% of the population. I was at a public meeting on Port of Aberdeen, sent the finance officer. He was telling us about all these great plans for the energy transition zone. And I said, but of course, this is incremental. First, you're going to take the park, and then you're going to take the golf course, and then you're going to take, and he said, that's not for years yet. And then he realised he'd gone in with both feet. I mean, what it's really about is about the harbour wanting that land for essential infrastructure. It's got nothing to do with the climate emergency or creating jobs or social benefit for the people of Torry. You know? They keep saying, oh, Torry's a deprived area and we're going to bring in jobs and money. Aye, right. What you're going to do is create a disaster in one of the very few beneficial things that the people have. You know, at that point, I get really angry. The injustice of it, the absolute injustice of treating decent, hardworking people as if they didn't matter, as if they could just roll over them for nothing. And the fact that we're paying, our taxes are paying for this.
I've been leading these walks for a couple of years now, and it's a real privilege to walk around St.Fitticks Park. It's a fantastic place, full of nature. Saw some deer this morning, badgers, foxes, huge numbers of fungi, lichen, all different sorts of birds, all sorts of wonderful stuff. Get occasional whiff from the sewerage station, but that's no great problem at all. Great thing about the walk is you get to meet such lovely people. We've got a regular core, we're always looking for more. Sadly, we're stopping for the season, but we'll be starting again in the spring. We've learned that the final planning applications are going to the council on the 6th of November. And it's been slated for approval. It is possible this might be the last Friday we're allowed to walk in the park, because all these lovely trees around here are scheduled to be cut down, replaced with concrete, replaced with a factory. It's a real travesty of justice that this lovely park might be sacrificed for big business. There's absolutely no need for another factory here. Aberdeen's full of industrial sites. Alton's, where the ETZ Limited is based, huge numbers of vacant properties up there. This is really wild nature. These forest paths that we've been on this morning, they're almost unique in Aberdeen. You have to go out to King's Wells and Cults before you can walk in pure countryside like this. I would really like to bring ETZ round here and ask them how they could make anything more beautiful than this. Oh, the fight goes on. The fight goes on.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name's Ian Baird. I live in Torry, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Friends of St.Fitticks Park to address an issue of public trust. Following independent legal advice, we believe St.Fitticks Park and its surrounding wetlands are not general council property as stated by Aberdeen City Council. They form part of the historic lands of Torry Trust, a charitable estate, the reserved portion of which was judicially restored to the trust in 1876 after the court declared a 1797 sale to the city illegal, null and void. Yet Aberdeen City Council is now advancing plans with the ETZ Limited on land it admits in a Freedom of Information response dated 18th of September 2025 is partly held in trust, while claiming, I quote, it cannot identify other areas with certainty. We call on all councillors in their personal responsibility as individual trustees of the lands of Torry Trust to suspend the planning meeting today and demand city officers publish the land schedule and demonstrate lawful authority to develop the land. And just a closing statement, this is not about stopping energy transition. It is about honouring a 300-year-old promise enshrined in a court judgment that certain lands would be held in trust, not for profit. We call on them to do the right thing, and we warn all others, proceed at your peril. Thank you very much.
Whose land? Whose park? Whose land? Whose park?
Well, it was both matters specified in conditions applications were approved unconditionally in spite of sort of trenchant points that we made. In the first one, a lot of the councillors were very worried about the lack of end users. But ETZ folk also were in discussions and projects are moving forward. You know, we miss out on this, miss out on our aspiration to be the leading, you know, floating wind hub. So that just got approved unconditionally. And in the second one, Ishbel raised points about the vast amounts of toxic sediment, 500 plus tons of it. What was going to be done then, and Councillor Alphonse was very concerned about that. And Scott had a bit of a spat with the Lucy Green about exactly what the CEPA letter said, because he read that they weren't content and she interpreted it as yes they were. And that was just not, in spite of Councillor Alphonse says she had grave concerns, and she had a seconder as well, and Councillor Blake wanting more information about the flooding, they just nodded it through. Well, they're going to start moving the burn. That's the first thing, and they contend. They say, "Oh, that is it's an improvement." But of course, it was pointed out that actually it would not have happened because unless the burn had been sitting right underneath where part of the development site's going to be, so the burn has to go. And I'm not convinced because I was worried that they hadn't specified any end users in the phasing plan until phase 3, when they were actually going to be building the buildings on top of the hard-standing development plots they developed in phase 2. And now they're saying, well, yes, we will need an end user in phase 2, but will that happen? Who knows? Their developers might say, no, we want the site good to go, ready for us to put our building up. And you might sort of do that before anyone's actually signed on the dotted line. So, and the last thing, I nearly went rogue. I nearly said, I don't know why I'm bothering. Doesn't matter what I say. So.
Whose part?
Our part.
Whose land?
Our land.
Whose part?
Our part.
Whose land?
Our land.
So what ETZ are proposing to do is they're proposing to realign the burn. Now here we are. What that means is at the moment we have this little pond here. This is not part of the main flow. This is an offshoot of the wetlands, which is generally finding a path through here in this direction here. So all of the high bulrushes and so on, that's part of the main course of the wetlands. What they're proposing to do is divert that flow to come directly across this way and feed this, and this would become the main wetland area and take a route down to the harbour from here. And what that would do would be this land would then become drier and free it up for the building of platforms, hard standing, for buildings to be built. So the purpose of realigning the burn is to create space for the industrial development there. It's not about enhancement or biodiversity, increasing biodiversity. That is what is claimed. It's patent nonsense, because the best that can be done is to eventually recreate what we already have. But the idea that this is an enhancement, I'm afraid it doesn't stand up to any scrutiny at all. Oh, so this fencing's new, yeah, right. But why are they fencing it off on this side? I'm not sure. I'd like to ask the foreman, but I have a feeling this is where the burn is going to be realigned from the wet portion just behind those trees there to join up with the pond which is behind us. Oh dear. We're not going to get any further. This is terribly sad. So that's was the sports pitch. Looking to the east here, currently the flow of the burn is going under the bridge here, and eventually out to the harbour. Now if you go to the beginning of the park, where this watercourse enters the park, before it becomes wetland, and it's coming straight from the industrial estate, the water is really rather, it's disgusting. And already here, it's noticeably cleaner, and if you look at it just before it exits the park, it really is, I'm not saying it's pure, but it's much, much cleaner water. And that demonstrates how wetlands work. So the South Harbour is benefiting from the wetlands by virtue of the fact that it hasn't got dirty water piling into the harbour area, which would then be, of course it's enclosed there, that would be a problem for them. By changing it to run in this direction, in time these trees will be felled and this whole area will be concreted over, going right back to the sewage works. It's actually quite a huge area. It's only, you see this on paper, you see plans, and it's bad enough when you see it there, but when you come down and look closely and realise what's going to go, it really comes home.